Well, I was really excited about preparing this morning's message because it involved yo-yos. Now, everyone knows what a yo-yo is. Yes. Unfortunately, in my eagerness to share a message based around a yo-yo, which, by the way, had to be an orange yo-yo. Do you know how hard it is to find an orange yo-yo? I was all very excited. I went out with Gabs yesterday and we went shopping, and I thought, right, I'll come home and I'll have a bit of a practice thing because I wanted to give a bit of an active demonstration. Last week Blair shared all around an illustration involving cones, right? This week it was yo-yo, so I thought, yes, it was great. Went shopping, came home, yes, I was going to practice, and because I used to enjoy using a yo-yo when I was a bit younger, hadn't done it for a number of years. It was all good, got it out of the pack, did it a couple of times, it was great, then I thought, yeah, we'll take it to the next level. Whipped it across like that worked, went back across, hit the pantry door, shattered my yo-yo into bits. And so I stand here before you this morning, a failed yo-yo instructor. I'm sorry about that. So what I thought I'd do instead is I thought that, you can either look at me and failing really badly with my yo-yo, or we could watch a young Mr. Zach Gormley, who is the 2014 World Yo-Yo Champion. So take a minute and have a look at the screen. He'll show us how it's done. Hey, how easy was that? I've come to the conclusion, really, and I mean, I'm saying this out of all respect to Zach, who was the world champion, but surely he mustn't have much of a life to become that good, because if you think about how much it takes, how much practice it takes to be able to do that is phenomenal. And he's 16 years old. So apparently he picked up the yo-yo for the first time when he was 11, and it became a bit of an obsession for him. And you can see the results of that. But isn't that cool? What's it like to be able to do that? Has anyone ever seen the old yo-yo trick, walk the dog? Yeah. Do you know how hard that is? Yeah. How many? I'd break heaps of yo-yos just even trying to perfect that one. But anyway, where I'm going with this morning is that in the same way that Blair used the cone illustration last week, which is something actually really simple to picture, this morning I want us to visualise a basic yo-yo move. And what I mean by that is that we have the yo-yo in your hand, and obviously the string around your finger, and you drop the yo-yo down, and it goes down, it spins, and it comes back to your hand. Can everyone picture that move in your head? Everyone's familiar with that? That was probably a little bit too advanced up there, but the thing with that particular move is that at the top of the loop is the source of energy, and the source of energy gives the yo-yo enough power to go down, spin, and return to the hand. Does everyone get that? Right? So as it drops and spins, it loses its original energy and must return to the hand for another boost. Right, does everyone get that? So what we could do is we could call a basic yo-yo toss, we could call it a loop of engagement. It's something that you have to repeat. And if you think about it, there's only one thing that is actually guiding the yo-yo, and it's actually the string. And how many strings are there doing this? How many strings does he have? Just one. That's right. Even though you look at Zach and it's actually the one piece of string, going around, it's just quite phenomenal. But there's only one piece of string. There's not two pieces of string or three pieces of string, there's only one. And it's the string is guided by what we could call an integrated hand. And the hand, technically, if you get it right, should make sure that nothing gets tangled. Now, last week Blair talked about the importance of having a long-term integrated strategy when it comes to our families. When we combine the two influences of home and church, symbolised by the colours red and yellow, we get orange. And the colour orange represents the long-term synergy. It's the synergy we get when the two work in sync to help develop the next generation of disciples. And do you remember how Blair did his illustration with the cones? right? He laid out the cones, and he had a soccer ball, and he talked about little children, little kids, when they start playing soccer, right, they're introduced to this basic drill that involves dribbling the ball in and out of the cones. And they dribble them around the cones, around the back, and back to the start. Does everyone remember that? Right? And as kids get used to this drill, a good coach will then teach the kids not to look at the cone in front of them, but to do the drill by looking at the cone at the end of them. It was really interesting. I was at Jack's soccer graduation yesterday, and they stood up two young men who were Jack's age, and these two young guys have been selected to go to England to train with, I think it's Manchester United development squad, or something like that. But the coach acknowledged the fact that when they started, he was encouraging everyone, saying it was actually, that you've got to remember all the kids start out with basic drills. I thought the timing of this was actually quite incredible in light of what I was going to talk about today. But a good coach will teach the kids to do the drill by looking at the end cone. And the byproduct, of course, of learning the drill like this is it helps kids to see the big picture of the game. And so when you practice that drill and you get good at it, you can look around and you can see what's happening in the entire game. This is what they're teaching. And they learn how to take part in a coordinated effort to attack, and they learn all about a coordinated effort to defend. And that simple drill can pay dividends come game day. As the kids get older, it can be the difference between them being a premier player and a player in the lower grade. But the point of that illustration is this. We all need to develop big picture thinking when it comes to raising the next generation of disciples. And for all of us here, and especially for the fathers in the room this morning, we need to think about what our children will be like 10 years down the track in relation to their character and capacity. So as a father, do we raise our children using the cone illustration, just simply looking at the next cone, where we're at in the chaos of now, or are we raising our kids by looking at the end goal in mind? Now, this yo-yo illustration is an extension of this idea of a long-term strategy, right? So hopefully, when I talk about a yo-yo this morning, it will help us to put legs to the strategy of what we would call activating the family, or reactivating the family for some of us. When the yo-yo is released, it spins kinetically. It goes through its rhythm and cycles back up, unless you're like me, which it hits the pantry door. But it's not meant to do that. But there's a definite pattern. Up to get energy, down to spin, up to get reactivated, down to spin again. And this illustration gives us a picture as to how it could be for us personally and for our families. So if you're a dad here with young children this morning, this is a great time to get your head around this stuff. If we combine the influence of home and church, we come up to get energy, down to spin the message and be a living demonstration. We come up to get reactivated, and down to live out in everyday life in a world that is hurting and in pain. And as I previously mentioned, there is only one string held by an integrated hand that guides the yo-yo on its path, making sure that nothing gets tangled. Now, if we were to draw this in a diagram, right? Some of us need to be visual learners. It could look like this. We could write the word influence at the top by the string. And that, of course, is the part that provides the energy. It's the influence that helps us stay on the right track. You see, in the orange strategy, it is our faith community under God's guidance that provides the influence. That's part of the strategy. Why do I say that? If you're a father in this room, and if you've got younger kids, I want to talk to you guys specifically for a moment. And I want to talk to you as a dad myself. I guarantee that there are times that you have laid in bed at night worrying about your kids. If you've been a father, does everyone fall into that category in terms of dads? Right? It's just part of the fatherhood thing. They don't tell you about that before you sign up for it, right? They don't tell you that at that moment you handle your newborn child, that there'll be all this stuff, but it's part of the gig, right? But I know I have. Maybe my children had done something wrong, or maybe they had been on the receiving end of an injustice, or maybe things just hadn't been going well for them. Maybe they had been sick, or maybe they had had an accident. Or maybe your child, when they get older, struggles with things like addiction or struggles with interpersonal relationships. Chances are, whatever the situation was, it was a situation that you had absolutely no idea what to do. Right? Or it was a situation in which, as a dad, you were going to have to make a tough call. I know that when I became a father for the first time, yes, Gabby, I'm talking about you, it slowly dawned on me that this child who I loved immensely did not come with an instruction manual. Right? And in fact, I'll share this from a personal perspective. When Gabs was born, the birthing experience didn't go very well for my lovely wife. And there was a high probability that I was going to leave the hospital with a brand new baby and no wife. Right? So you imagine what you go through at that particular time as a dad. So you've got someone who you love immensely that it's not going well for, and you start figuring, this is my fault, right? But you're also holding a brand new, beautiful life package that you're going, I have no idea what to do, right? And so as fathers, what I did is right from the beginning, I started to try and look for solutions, because that's what we do, we put our fix-it hat on. But let's face it, sometimes in life when it comes to raising kids, we don't have solutions. And the problem is way bigger than we are, or way bigger than we can handle. And as our kids grow, we begin to realise that there are a lot of other influences, not all of them good ones, fighting for the attention of your family. And so the cycle becomes that you're awake again at night, wondering what you should do. But there is something inherent in all of us as fathers, in that we want to fight for and protect our families and our kids. But sometimes we just don't know how. Right? And I think for some of us dads who had a rough road with the whole raising kids thing, my hunch is that there were times that you wanted to do the right thing, but you just didn't know how. And if you're here this morning where you've had a bit of a rough road with your dad, chances are this was the situation that he faced. He probably wanted to do the right thing, but didn't know how to do the right thing, because he didn't have an instruction manual. Last week, Blair began taking us through the story of Nehemiah. And he talked about how Nehemiah started out as a cupbearer to the Persian king. And one day when he came into the king's presence, the king noticed that he was sad. And when the king inquired as to why he was sad, Nehemiah prayed, he took a deep breath, and then he explained to the king the reason for his grief. What you have to understand is that particular movement could have cost Nehemiah his life, right, in that setting. But he had heard that there was a rebuilt temple in the home of the city of his faith in Jerusalem. But the city was defenceless and the people living there were in danger. And so the first part of the book of Nehemiah is all about the way in which Nehemiah strategically petitioned the king to get back to Jerusalem and rebuild walls. And that's what Blair touched on last week. But when he arrives at Jerusalem after his long trip, the very first thing he does is that he, in the middle of the night, after this massive long journey, he goes out into the city to survey the damage. That's what he does. And the Babylonians, years earlier, had certainly done a good job at tearing the city to bits and the city walls specifically. But Nehemiah knew that if those walls were left unfixed, then the people in the city were in trouble. Not only did he take time to assess the damage, but the reality of the external dangers hit home. He knew that any moment they could be attacked and wiped out. That's what they lived with. There were external influences that were going to potentially destroy them. So what was his strategy? His strategy, man, he was clever. His strategy was to appeal to the hearts of the fathers. He knew that deep down, every father wants to protect their family. Regardless of the relationship dynamic and everything that's going on, he knew that deep down every father wanted to protect their family. And so Nehemiah explains his strategy like this. Can we put that slide up, Mike? It says this: "Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, 'Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes.'" So look, very smart man. So the first thing he did was acknowledge God. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. Right? Brought the spiritual focus to it. And then he appealed to the heart of every father who deep down wants to fight for their families. Fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. The text also goes on to say, by the way, that he placed the families in groups of families, right? By the part of the broken wall that was nearest to where they lived. And so, very smart, getting them to fight for their families in their homes, but also in groups of families. So he placed them in groups of families, not just one family. No family was alone. No man was alone in the defence of his family. No man fought alone. They each had each other's back in the defence of their families. And the men had each other's back in case they were attacked. And what a great picture of a healthy faith community, if you think about it. And I actually think it's a picture, really, of what church should be like. And in doing this, they completely rebuilt the broken walls of Jerusalem in 52 days by hand. At one point, they were concerned that they were going to be attacked. So part of the story is that they had the hand on their sword and were building with one hand. Right? Phenomenal. But that is a historical, documented fact, external to scriptures. But this is something that the scriptures also talk about. So the Israelites, this community of faith, gained synergy in their task because they were all on the same page and they worked together. Guys, if you are a father in this room, and I'm talking to me as well, alright, so I'm talking to myself, but we have to step up and take responsibility for the spiritual health and discipleship of our families. Will you always get it right? No, you won't. I can testify to that. But that's what we are all here for, to encourage each other and figure it out together. And taking personal responsibility for your family is not some kind of power trip, by the way. Right? But if you love and trust and encourage your wife to be all she can be, she will naturally respect you back. It just kind of works like that. And if you don't know how to do that, then it's very simple. Just think road cones and yo-yos. Alright? You need to shift your thinking around your family's discipleship to a long-term strategy. And can I say that in the hecticness of life, that gets to be really hard because you live in the now, right? Someone's sick, someone needs to go over here, someone's got a party over here, someone's got a grandson needs to go and buy a present, someone's going to McDonald's, things haven't gone well at school, someone needs some money for this which we don't have, what the teacher just gave you that now, you know what I mean, right? You live in the chaos of this. But we need to shift our thinking around our family's discipleship to a long-term strategy, big picture thinking. That's the cones. And like Nehemiah's strategic thinking, we need to leverage the discipleship process of our families of the synergy of the wider faith community. You see, the thing about Nehemiah was that he assessed the situation. As fathers, we need to assess the situation. He knew that there were other way stronger outside influences that could potentially wipe them out. So a serious question I have for you is this. What are other things that are influencing your community, influencing your family for the worse? And if you don't know quite what I mean by that, the thing is that what are the sorts of things going on in your family that have a negative effect that you really don't know what to do about? That's another way of looking at it. Because you see, the challenge is, if we don't fight for our families, then who will? As men, if we don't stand and actively fight for our marriages, then they will dissolve. And if we don't actively stand and fight for relationships with our children, then they will be strained. That's just what happens. And let's face it, we all of us, come from dysfunctional backgrounds. The whole lot of us. There is no such thing as the perfect family. Right? We're all dysfunctional. As Julie points out to me, some are more dysfunctional than others. But we're all dysfunctional. And sometimes the things that we find ourselves doing is simply replicating something that was done to us. Who has ever found themselves in that thing? I will never be like my father, I'd say. And then I'd find myself doing things to my children that my dad did to me. Especially if it was something that we swore that we would never do, And ladies, I've heard some of you say the same thing about your mums. Isn't that right? So if you want to have an effective battle plan for your family, then here it is. Yo-yos. The loop of engagement. In the same way that the string influences the yo-yo, gives it energy and keeps it on track, the key influence I believe that you need to have in your life and the life of your family is the influence of Christ through the faith community. Right? There are many different brands of what that looks like. Right? There's some great churches in our community. But I'd like to also say, by the way, that East City is a great place for this to happen. But the reason I say this is because the values that Christ brings to the table will help you navigate life. It will empower your children to wrestle with the issues of life, which will ultimately make your job as a father a lot easier. Not easy, but just a bit easier. And it will help the next generation grow as disciples. And ultimately, if this is done well, you will win the hearts of your children. Because that's really, really important. It doesn't take much research to find that there have been, it's kind of well known that when your kids hit their teenage years, that if there's a particular time that there might become a permanent rift between a child and their father, it's at this time. Because a father tends to get angry about a lot of things, but it's only because we don't have the instruction book, right? We want to do the right thing, but sometimes we struggle to know what that is. So, the values that Christ brings to the table will help us navigate life and help the next generation grow as disciples and ultimately win the hearts of our kids. Sundays, I believe, can be the catalysts that give families new beginnings each week. Right? So I'm just putting it out there that I think that's the yo-yo at the top. Right? And it makes everyday faith a reality. In doing that, like the yo-yo, we come down, up to get energy, down to spin the message and be a demonstration. Or to put it another way, we come up to get reactivated and down to live out everyday life. We have each other's backs and we work together to win the battle. At the moment, with our young people at Youth Church, we had a great night here, by the way, last night, so well done team again. Just seeing the effort that you guys put into it and the turnout was amazing. But at the moment, these guys are talking about the whole issue of forgiveness and how that applies to life. How forgiveness should be a value is something that we choose to do. We choose to forgive. So this is really important. But what happens is, you see, as fathers, we can go, yes, I agree with that. Fantastic. Kids can go off and get some pointers, and then if they come back with questions or what you see, we're on the same page in learning, these values. And that is a great example of families and church working in sync. So when church and family collide, synergy is created and disciples are made. And so if there's one thing that I would like you to take away this morning as fathers, it is this. Very, very simple. Strategic fathers will leverage off the faith community to activate their family. That's it. Strategic fathers will leverage off the faith community to activate or reactivate their family. Because, we don't get it right. We do not get it right. I think of some of the things that I've got that are so far wrong, it wasn't funny, I thought I knew it was right, but my wife pointed out that I didn't. It turned out later upon hindsight that she might have been right about that, but that's okay. But as a bloke, I needed to hear that from another good friend, not necessarily my wife. That's the way that us blokes work. But I remember this friend of mine, a mentor of mine, saying, hey, just keep your kids tapped in, help them to be introduced to the values that you want them to live by, and work together with that, So I just want to put that out here for fathers. Smart fathers will leverage off the faith community, and it will ultimately make your job as a father easier. Not necessarily easy, but easier. Actually, by way of response this morning, I'd like to call the music team forward. Haven't they done a good job this morning? Yeah. Very good. Yeah, well done, but by way of response, this is what I'd like us to spend the next few minutes doing. It won't be long, but maybe some of you fathers here would like prayer to recommit yourselves or commit yourselves to activating or reactivating your family, the discipleship journey of your family. As fathers, we need to take responsibility for the well-being and spiritual growth of our families. So maybe some of you here as fathers would like some prayer to commit yourself to that this morning. But secondly, all of us in this room either have or have had a father. Yeah? I don't think any of us were spawned, but you never know. Could have happened these days, but my hunch is probably not here. But for some of us, our fathers are great and wonderful people who we love immensely. My challenge to you as part of our response today is that if your dad is in the room, go and tell him that. Tell him how much you love him. Right? Because it's a very, very important thing to do. Or if your dad's not here, then put that on your to-do list for the day. Make sure that you contact your dad if you can. But for others of us, our fathers aren't that great. And our relationship with them is broken or strained. And for some of us, there's nothing that we can do about it. And if you fall into that category today, as the music team plays, I want you to take a moment and pray and commit the relationship with your Father back to our Heavenly Father. Because He sees all things. And sometimes there are things that we just can't do. It's outside of our control. But I would like you to begin the process of forgiving your dad by praying a prayer of blessing this morning on him. For others of us, our dads may have passed away. And if you're in that category this morning, as part of this time, we have our remembrance table over here. And if you'd like to come and float a flower for Dad, then feel free to do that. But as you do, just come and pray for your dad, or just pray for the relationship your dad had with you at the same time. So that's our response this morning. So as these guys play, feel free to use this time, the next couple of minutes, as you feel led.